let's continue the focus on water then as we commemorate World Water Day and reflect on the infrastructure and some of the water supply challenges in this country. For more on this, we're joined for this conversation tonight by Helen Suzman Foundation Head, Charles Simkins, and water and civil engineering consultant Neil Macleod. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time. Firstly, let's just begin with perhaps reflecting on what Minister Mgunu has said earlier on in the day, that South Africa does not have a water crisis. Charles, is he correct?
Well, he's correct this year, and he's correct about supplies in our dams. But this has been an astonishingly rainy summer. And it's a consequence of La Nina current in the Pacific, we understand. If that changes, get El Nino back, we could have a major water availability crisis, especially in some parts of the country.
Of course, until people see water coming out of their taps, to them the problem exists in as far as they've had some of these challenges taking place for a number of years now. So Neil, what's the real problem here? Why are we unable to get the water that's in the dams into people's taps?
Well, there's a lot behind that. It comes down mainly to the way the systems that are the responsibility of the municipalities are being managed and run. So if you don't do maintenance and you don't have the right people with the right skills in place, and you don't collect the revenue that you need to collect to pay for what needs to be done, then you can't do what needs to be done. And so it's a combination of management and revenue and other factors. Just to add to what Charles said, we are very lucky that many dams are overflowing, because there's a science called stochastic hydrology where you model the chance of systems running dry. And the Gauteng region should be under restrictions, but they've had a lot of rain. The region where I live, KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, Maritzburg, we're in deficit. The Eastern Cape's in terrible trouble. So, we're just lucky, as Charles said, that there's been a lot of rain. If it wasn't for that, we would be in rationing.
So what does that mean, Neil, especially for the current consumption of water and the kind of planning we need to be doing again around what, future estimates say will continue to be a declining availability of water?
Well, the answer to that is to manage the demand properly. And although we're known as a water-scarce country, so countries are rated by how much water is available per person. And we are right at the bottom of the list. We equate to desert countries. And our rainfall pattern across the country is very varied. 60% of the rain and the runoff is in two provinces, KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Province. And if you look at the way the rainfall varies across the country, in our part of the country on the East Coast, we get well over a meter of rain a year. If you go across to the Northern Cape, they don't even get 100 millimeters of rain a year. And our total average rainfall across the whole country is about 460 millimeters a year. The world average is about 860. So we are a very dry country, and yet we use water equivalent to what happens in places like New York. If you divide the total amount of water that we use divided by the number of people, we use about 273 liters per person per day. The world average is 173. So we are using far too much water. But a lot of that is because of what Charles said. There are leaks. We are not managing the system properly. And so you get into this thing called non-revenue water. How much of the water that enters the system actually ends up going through a meter and raising a bill? And in our country, 41% of the water that goes in at the beginning of the value chain never gets to raise a bill. It's either leaks out of the pipes before it gets to a meter, or it's stolen, taken without being paid for by anybody. So it's a major problem. If you're losing 40% of your water, imagine running a shop where 40% of the stuff goes out the door with nobody paying for it. And then you're trying to run a business and fix the pipes and pay the salaries. It's an impossible task.
Charles,
and that comes down to management.
Sure. So just looking at that one issue alone around water leaks, and we know that water is a huge revenue generator for municipalities. How does that then impact the overall distribution of water in municipalities? Because I hear the stats that Neil has read about how much water we use per person versus the global average. But at the same time, I'm thinking about the question of access and the extent to which this water usage could well vary depending on where in the country you live.
Oh, it does vary a lot. And I mean, some people don't yet have a reticulated water supply to their homes. So the people who don't consume very little water because they have to carry it long distances quite often. So it does vary a lot. And the other thing is that your water consumption is a normal good. That is to say, the more income you have, the more water you're likely to consume. And so that means as the country develops, if incomes start to rise again, then there will be an increased demand of water and increased pressure on this inefficient system.
When we look at, again, this idea of water as a basic right, is it not problematic that the only way you're able to access the water that you need is if you're able to improve your income levels? Charles, let me stay with you.
Well, we have a system whereby there's a sort of basic water allowance for everybody, and municipalities actually get part of their equitable share to pay for it for people who can't pay for them by themselves. What I'm thinking about is more the more luxury uses of water. You may have a garden, you may want to keep that watered. You may have a swimming pool. All these kinds of things also increase the demand for water. And indeed, there's a demand for water from industry and mines and so forth. And as they produce more, they will be demanding more water.
Neil, how do we change the water usage patterns of our country? Again, it seems to be a conversation we've been having for a number of years, but nothing tangible or campaigns that are run are always short-lived.
So just to put some numbers to it, if you remember that average consumption, it's the total consumption, including industry, everybody, divided by the number of people, of 273 litres per person per day. The research that I've seen done many times shows that if you have to go and carry your water from somewhere, even from a standpipe, the average use by those poor families without direct access to a tap in their house is 7 litres per person per day. And you need 50 litres in a tropical climate to sustain a basic level of living. So even the national government standard of 25 litres per person per day is inadequate. So what we need to do is be able to extend the networks to connect everybody to a tap in their house, but then to manage that consumption and charge for it at a level that is affordable. So we have a policy in this country, as Charles said, of free basic water, 6 kilolitres, which is based on a false assumption in terms of the 25 litres that the government uses. So it should be 9 kilolitres a month. So if you are able to connect people and generate the revenue, I mean, I've seen research recently by the government itself that the amount of water, that 41%, is 1.6 billion cubic meters of water a year that's lost.
Sure.
1.6 trillion liters. And you're talking, if you cost that even at a basic cost price of 6 rand a kiloliter, which is still low today, it's more than that now. You're talking about 10 billion rand a year in lost revenue. You could do a lot with 10 billion. I think the government said they need about 30 billion to eradicate the backlog. So if that 10 billion was all, and it's not possible to get rid of it all, but if that 10 billion was all converted into revenue, cash in the utilities, in 3 years you could wipe out the backlog.
All right.
So it's all about management.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there for tonight. Charles Simkins, Head of Research at the Helen Suzman Foundation, and Neil Macleod, a water and civil engineering consultant. Thank you both for your insights.